Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, October 11th. We have a big show for you. It is Friday, so that means we are doing game picks. We have the top 15 games in college football this weekend in a wild, stacked slate, including a top 3 matchup. Number 2 versus number 3. We'll get into that in a little bit. And of course, every single NFL game. But we're also going to break down some stuff from last night. We had 2 baseball games. We had the Yankees punching their ticket, the first one to advance to the ALCS, and the Guardians forcing a do-or-die Game 5 back at home in Cleveland tomorrow. We'll talk about that and, of course, the Thursday night football game. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, October 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show here in the world of baseball. We had 2 elimination games take place last night, both in the AL Game 4. The first one, where we saw the Cleveland Guardians escape with a victory over the Detroit Tigers. The Detroit Tigers were 1 victory away from advancing to the ALCS. Guardians were able to force a Game 5, and it's been the same. They got a little bit more of the offense. We were talking about it yesterday when we were assessing this game. We were saying, hey, what needs to happen for the Guardians to avoid elimination here? And what happened is they needed the offense to go. Lane Thomas had a huge hit in the first inning. They struck first. Again, another thing that we talked about. Whoever strikes first in this matchup is going to be able to pull this off. We saw a lot of great offense from Steven Kwan. Steven Kwan, once again, has been amazing all postseason long. 3 for 5 yesterday, scored twice. He raises his average in the postseason to 500. It's ridiculous what he's able to do just with his bat-to-ball skills. But we also saw Jose Ramirez hit a home run. That's what we've been waiting on, some pop out of Jose Ramirez. Obviously, the big one, the one that ended up getting them win, was the home run by David Fry there in pinch hitting home run in the postseason to keep your team away from elimination. But we saw all of the big guys get hits. Josh Naylor got a hit. Jose Ramirez got a hit. Lane Thomas had 2 hits. This is the kind of offense we were waiting for out of the Cleveland Guardians this entire series. They snapped a 15-inning scoreless streak in the first inning. They got on Reese Olson quickly. They did what they needed to do, and they won the game. That was just a great game for both teams. It was a great baseball game, and we saw Detroit continue to do what they're going to do. They're going to continue to fight, continue to stay in the game, even when it seems like they're out of it. I would assume on Saturday, and they haven't announced it yet, but for this crucial Game 5, I would assume the Tigers are throwing Tariq Skubal. Oh, yep, there we go. Just was announced, Skubal versus Matthew Boyd on this one. This is going to be an awesome game. Of course, we've seen Skubal twice already in this postseason, once in Game 2 of this series, where he completely shut down the Cleveland Guardians. This should be a fun game. I don't know if Skubal's going to be able to do that shutdown, don't let anybody on, don't let anybody score 3 times in a row. But he's been the best pitcher in the AL by far for a reason. So if anyone can do it, it's going to be him. And that's what this game is going to be riding on. But it was a great game by the Guardians. They finally got all their big bats to go, and that's what they've been waiting on. They finally got it done. But getting on to the actual elimination game. The New York Yankees in Kansas City have officially eliminated the Royals. This was a game that when we were talking about it, we said, hey, the Royals need to strike quick. They need to strike early on Garrett Cole. Otherwise, he's just going to be too dominant. And that's what we saw. We saw Garrett Cole go 7 innings, only give up 1 run. That was in the 6th. The Royals struggled to get base runners on for most of this game. And even after Garrett Cole left the final 2 innings, they were unable to get anything. Really, against the entire bullpen of the Yankees, the whole series, the bullpen did not allow a run. That's incredible. Now, you can talk all you want about the Yankees bullpen. I think this goes a little bit more towards the side of the Royals struggling a little bit. We saw Bobby Witt continue to do his thing. Bobby Witt, awesome. One of the best players in all of baseball. And he stepped up when they needed him to. They weren't able to get much out of anybody else in their lineup. Tommy Pham, 3 for 3, but there was just no offensive production right now. Obviously, on the Yankees side, it's not all the pitching. The pitching stepped up. The pitching played great. But Andre brings up Juan Soto. And yes, Juan Soto, like you say, is built for the playoffs. We've seen him on runs with the Nationals. In a series where Aaron Judge was really struggling, one where they needed to count on Giancarlo Stanton, when he stepped up big. You also saw Soto make up for some of his mistakes in yesterday's in game 3, where he missed a ball. Didn't really matter. They were able to win that one. But Juan Soto comes through. He always does what he needs to do, driving in a run, the first run of the game. Again, it's very important to get out early in these playoff games, especially against a team like the Royals that have really solid pitching. That's what either of these teams needed to do, and they were able to do it. But turning to the baseball game tonight, the Yankees advanced. They joined the Mets. Both New York teams have made it to the NLCS. Now they're both waiting on their partners. The baseball game tonight decides who the Mets are going to play. This is a battle in LA. The Padres take on the Dodgers. Obviously, the Dodgers, awesome lineup. Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, so on and so forth. They got some production from Gavin Lux for the first time in a while. Will Smith stepped up big in the last game. But you get a pitching matchup between Yu Darvish, who in his first game this series against the Dodgers, basically shut them down. Only allowed 1 run through 7 innings. It was incredible outing for him. It's been a while, and with the Padres losing Joe Musgrove early on in this season, early on in this series, he's a guy that needs to step up, and if he can do that again, the Dodgers might be in trouble. But the Dodgers are bringing out their rookie Yoshi Yamamoto, who didn't look his best in his first start in the playoffs. 3 innings, got hit pretty hard in his first outing in the playoffs. This one should be a lot. Again, baseball playoffs have been awesome. All of these series so far have been awesome to watch. But when we take a look at this one, this is the one that's had the most animosity, the most hatred between the two teams. Heading back to LA, I think that crowd burst is going to be massive. As much as I want to pick the Padres here, and as much as I want to believe that Yu Darvish can put on a performance like he did in Game 2 of this series, I think it's going to be tough. I think this is going to be just like Game 1 and Game 3 in this series, where it's going to be an offensive explosion, and it's just going to be a matter of whose offense can come out on top. We saw in Game 1 it was the Dodgers. Game 3 it was the Padres. I think it's going to be one of those high-scoring affairs again, and I think I'm leaning towards the Dodgers in this one. As much as I want to pick the Padres, I think the Dodgers are just better suited for this. They've got more experience in the playoffs here. I know, Andre. They can light him up, and Yu Darvish did really good in his first matchup in Game 2. But when you're taking a look at this roster, Shohei Ohtani has been just too good. He really has been. The lights have not been too bright for him, and I think at the end of the day, I trust that lineup more than I trust the Padres lineup by just a little bit. I do think this is going to be must-watch television tonight, though. It should be, like I said, an offensive explosion of a game, like we saw in Game 1 and Game 3, when these teams scored 11 runs each total in the first couple of innings. But that's our baseball talk for today. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to break down Thursday Night Football. We're going to talk about how the San Francisco 49ers finally look like themselves a little bit. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the station, look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up in the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. All this shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, cheating my way into be put down. Hitting your place, I'll hit my sound. I want that shit that I'm getting right now. I'm losing it in the losing fit, the losing shit, the stupid myth. You choose to live, but choose to dip. You choose to fight, illusion, grip, and lose your gift. Oh. Feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, October 11th. If you're just tuning in, we just went over the baseball games from last night that saw the New York Yankees advance to the ALCS, and we predicted the awesome Game 5 do-or-die game in LA between the Dodgers and the Padres tonight to see who will face the New York Mets. For the rest of the show, we're transitioning to football. We're going to talk about Thursday Night Football in this segment, then get over to game picks. But before we do any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with the message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen. You can do the same thing if you are on YouTube using the Super Chat feature. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, October 11th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some football here, breaking down the Thursday Night Football matchup between the Niners and the Seahawks. This really did, like it says there in the title, feel like a must-win game for the San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers were down to 2-3 early in the season, easily their weakest start in at least the last couple of years. It had been a long time since the 49ers had been able to had struggled and gotten to this position, right? Brock Purdy, while he'd been playing pretty good football, hadn't been as mistake-free as you'd expect him to, and neither had the rest of this organization. They'd been dealing with injuries. They had a really weird offseason, and I think that has a lot to do with it. But coming into a division matchup, coming in 2-3, your opponent at 3-2 on top of the division, with the chance to take over the division if you're able to get a win here, it was a must-win game for both of these teams. And the 49ers were able to come out there and just absolutely dominate. This was the first game that we really saw the 49ers be the 49ers of that we expected them to be. Obviously, they end up losing Jordan Mason. It's just an AC joint sprain. He's listed as day-to-day, but the way that day-to-day injuries have, transition to week, transition to IR. You can never be too careful. That's going to be a big blow with how important he is. But we saw a big game out of Brock Purdy. And we kind of brought up yesterday when we were previewing this game the fact that you have to make a decision of whether or not you're going to pay Brock Purdy. And I think after this game, and it's not just because of this game, I think he already was in line to get that payday, but being able to put the team on the back, not make those mistakes he's been prone to making earlier on in the season, 18 for 28, 255, and 3 touchdowns for him. I think he's making his case to go and get that $60 million contract that, he's probably going to end up getting anyway with just the way that the quarterback market is going. But this was really encouraging to see out of the San Francisco 49ers. Like I said, a must-win game for this team, and they pulled together in the moment. The 49ers were a team that had Super Bowl aspirations, but we're looking outside in at the playoffs with how slow the season started. This was a huge game. You saw George Kittle cut out there, get 2 touchdowns. Kyle Juszczyk stepped up, had a touchdown in garbage time there. They had Isaac Guerrero come out there, break off like a 68-yard run down the stretch to put the game away. That defense stepped up big time, picking off Geno Smith twice, a guy in Geno Smith that doesn't usually turn the ball over too often. Lots and lots of positives for this San Francisco team as a whole. But moving over to the other side, the losing side, the Seattle Seahawks have bigger problems than I think a lot of people are willing to admit. A lot of people, I think, are going to try and put this on Geno Smith. And yes, his interception when they were only down one score to set up the 49ers in the red zone was a bad pick. It was his first really bad pick of the season, but he's out there. He's thrown the ball over 50 times for the second game in just 3 weeks. He is out there and he's being asked to do so much. The Seahawks have been falling behind because with their defense as banged up as it has been, including, half of their pass rushers being out, a couple of key pieces in the secondary being out, they're falling behind to teams that are good, yes, in the Lions and the 49ers, but also teams that probably aren't that good in the New York Giants. They're falling behind early, and that defense has not been able to make those stops, which is leading to Geno Smith having to throw the ball 50 times. This is a team with running backs like Kenny Walker that wants to run the ball. They want to be able to run the ball 20 times a game. They want to be able to be a run-first team. But they have not been able to do that because their defense has been falling way far behind against competent teams. When they played teams like, the Dolphins without Tua Tagovailoa, the Broncos, like the Patriots, these teams that are at the bottom of the league, these teams that are bottom feeders in the league right now, they didn't need to rely on Geno Smith that much. But now they're running into this 3-game losing streak against competent teams. Maybe the Giants don't count as one. They just got dominated on the defensive line there in that one. But still, it's not the kind of performance in back-to-back-to-back weeks of a defense led by a really good defensive coordinator, now their head coach. This is not the kind of performance that you're looking at and you feel confident in going forward. When you're talking about this Seahawks team, this is a team that was 3-0, was being talked about as one of the top teams in the NFC into their Monday Night Football with the Lions. Even after that, I gave them a lot of credit. They hung tough in that game. They played good football, but they've put up stinkers in back-to-back weeks. Something needs to change drastically for the Seahawks. And this was a game that was, as much as I say it's a must-win for the 49ers, it was a must-win for both of these teams. Both of these teams needed to get a win, and they desperately needed to keep control of that division or get control of that division. This is a huge loss for the Seahawks, and I think it really puts into perspective where they stand. They're kind of one of those middling teams. I said it a lot when we were going over predictions for this season. I think they're kind of that test. Good teams will beat them, bad teams will lose to them. They're kind of that middle ground, that median that I think teams have to go through, and that's what we're seeing right now. This is a Seahawks team that has so much potential. They just have holes that are a little too big to patch with that tape that they've got right now. They're not out of it yet. They're still tied for first in that division. If they can make a spark change quickly, they can absolutely stand a chance later on. They don't have a bye for a little while. They need to get something going. It's not an easy next couple of weeks. Their next 3 weeks until their bye, they take the Falcons on the road with a resurgent Kirk Cousins, and what that team's been able to do in recent weeks seems like they're only getting started. The Bills, who, much like the Seahawks, I thought were up top, are starting to slide a little bit, but still you have Josh Allen. And then the Rams, Matthew Stafford can do what he needs to do just about any day of the week. So that's not an easy way to head into your bye, and I think there's a real chance they lose 6 straight heading into there. That's not what you want to see. That's not what you want to happen if you are the Seahawks. This was a huge game for the 49ers to win. They needed it really, really badly. But let me know what you think of this one. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to focus on game picks. That's right. Every single game in the NFL slate, all of the weekend games we'll go over, including one in London. So make sure you stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows. Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube, absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, October 11th. If you were just tuning in, we just went over the Thursday night football game. In this segment, we are going to take a look at the weekend slate for the NFL and pick our winners. We'll go through each and every one, give you a score prediction. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you'd like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments, throw it in the chat. For instance, Andre says Mahomes is going to light them up next week in reference to the 49ers. I think you're right. The way the Chiefs are playing, the way the Niners are playing, I think it's absolutely going to be an awesome game, probably very high scoring. Mahomes should go off in that one, but we're saving that breakdown for next week. But yeah, appreciate anything you guys do have to say. Appreciate you all tuning in. But like I was saying, we are getting into our game picks this week. This week in the NFL, it is a mixed bags of it's a mixed bag of games. We have some really good ones, Washington at Baltimore, for example, and some ones that, I don't think anyone is going to want to see. Pittsburgh, Las Vegas should be an especially ugly one. But this should be a weekend full of great games either way. Starting off in London, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, technically on the road against the Chicago Bears, although this is definitely more of a home game for the Jaguars with how often they play in London. The Jaguars will actually spend the next 2 weeks there. So this week, I think they're going to find their bearings. They're coming off of a big win. They won their first game last weekend. Now they're traveling over to London to face a Bears team that has only gotten better every single week. Caleb Williams has continued to get better every single week. I'm not sure how they're going to handle this flight over to London. That's going to be a thing that the Jags are much better at dealing with, especially with a young team. But I'm going to go on the side of the Bears. I love what they've been doing. I love their defense. And I think that Caleb Williams, like I said, has continued to get better every single week this season. And there's no reason to think against a beaten, battered, bruised, not very good Jaguar secondary, he won't be able to do the same. I'm taking the Chicago Bears, who are favored by 1 point in this one, to win 23-19. Coming back across the pond to the U.S., we have one of those games that I don't think is going to be too close. The Houston Texans favored by 6.5 points, taking on the New England Patriots. This is going to be a fun game to watch because we get the debut of third overall pick rookie quarterback Drake May. I don't think it's going to go great. We saw what happens when the Houston Texans of this year play a rookie quarterback. They just blitz you. If they smell blood in the water, they are going to attack. So Drake May needs to be able to show early in this game he can handle the blitz. If not, his life is going to be not fun all day long. He's going to be under constant pressure. It's just going to be blitz after blitz after blitz after blitz, and this offensive line is not going to be good enough to handle it. I think maybe he gets a couple of points on the board, but I think this game is going to be very similar to the one that we saw the Texans play against the Bears in week 2 of this season. The Texans win 27-13. Then we get maybe the game of the week, as Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders travel just up I-95 to take on Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. This one should be electric. Both of these defenses, secondaries especially, are not very good. Jaden Daniels has been incredible. He's getting MVP buzz, which I think is absolutely deserved out of him. Lamar Jackson, coming off of an MVP, has been awesome, maybe just as good as last season, maybe better. But they also have Derrick Henry. And I think both of these teams, both of their defenses are bad, but I think the Baltimore defense is slightly better. This is going to be an offensive barrage. I think it's going to be a lot like last week we saw with the Ravens, where it was a final score of 41-38. I think this game is going to go very much along the same lines. Not too much defense being played on either end, but I think Baltimore is just a better team. I think 7 points is too much, though. I think Baltimore wins 34-38. Getting over to a game that, again, it's a mixed bag this week. I don't think this one is going to be that good. The Philadelphia Eagles host the Cleveland Browns, favored by 9.5 points coming off of a bye. We've talked about the Philadelphia Eagles and their issues. They're a good team. They just turn the ball over too much. This is a get-right game for them. They need to prove, Jalen Hurts especially needs to prove that he's not going to put the ball in harm's way, and they need to prove that this week if they want to be treated as any kind of contenders. The Cleveland Browns come off an awful loss, and I've been calling for it. Everyone in the world has been calling for it. It's time to bench Deshaun Watson. They're not going to do it because they can't, the way that the money works. It's going to make the trade look awful. The trade already looks awful. I say cut your losses, bench him, try to win some football games so you don't have to sell your team. A team that I think is good just playing with, no morale right now. I don't think this changes heading into a tough environment to play in Philly. I think the Eagles win pretty handily, 34-17. Then we get a game that, honestly, if you look at it on paper, it doesn't seem that close, but I do think it could go either way. A game between the Arizona Cardinals and the Green Bay Packers. And I've been very high on the Cardinals all year. The Cardinals are a team that I think with their offensive or theoretical offensive firepower couldn't compete with anybody. The issue is their defense, very bad at football. Their defense is not stopping anyone right now, and Jordan Love has seemingly found a groove. The Packers are going to get Romeo Doubs back. That's a huge get for them after he was suspended one game for conduct detrimental to the team. Maybe it's not going to matter. Maybe they're not going to use him that much. This should be a fun game either way. Another one of those high-scoring contests. Maybe Xavier McKinney gets another interception. 6 interceptions in 6 weeks is in play for him. That would be insane. That's a great get in the offseason for the Packers. This is a very good Packers team, and I think they're just going to be able to outmuscle the Cardinals. Favored by 5. I think the final score is Green Bay 31, Arizona 24. Then we get a division matchup. An interesting division matchup as Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers favored by 3.5 heading to New Orleans. Coming off of a brutal loss, New Orleans starting rookie, another first-time starter, Spencer Rattler, the late-round pick, getting his first start of the year after Derek Carr goes down with injuries. I'm not too sure how that's going to go. I think he's not going to be able to handle the pressure. I don't think the offense is going to run too well under him. I like the idea of Spencer Rattler, but what he showed us in the preseason and wasn't enough for me. It wasn't enough for me to feel confident getting him a start in the regular season, which is just a completely different speed than the preseason either way. I think the Bucs come out there and they dominate this game. It is a division game, so anything can happen, and adding to that anything can happen, it's an NFC South game, which doubles the intensity of anything can happen. But I'm taking Tampa Bay to win this one, 26-13. Then we get an ugly one. The Indianapolis Colts, without Jonathan Taylor, not sure if we're going to have Anthony Richardson in or not. He's going to start if he's healthy, taking on Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans. Will Levis is named the starter. It's in my opinion, that's a mistake. I know he's a young quarterback. I know he's a guy that has all the tools and skills to be able to turn it around. But like I was talking about with Jalen Hurts, He turns the ball over way too much. It's a good Titans defense. It really is a good Titans defense, and it's being wasted right now on a guy that cannot play clean football. The Titans probably should be the opposite of what their record is right now if Will Levis would just play clean football. Instead, they're down at the bottom of the league, and I don't think that changes this week, although I do think this will be a good game. Tennessee favored by 2.5. I think Indy comes into their house and wins 21-17. We get another division matchup, this one for second place in a division, or second place superiority right now, as the Los Angeles Chargers, off of a bye, favored by 3 points, heading to Denver. This is going to be a battle of two really good coaches. I know we talk about the product on the field, but the coaches, you get Jim Harbaugh taking on Sean Payton. This should be an all-time coaching battle. It should be a lot of fun. These two will match up twice every single year, at least for the expected future here. The Broncos have been awesome. Their defense has been awesome. Pat Surtain has been awesome, but I'm leaning towards the Chargers in this one. I know this is a game that we take a look at and we say, Denver at home, they've played great football. Bo Nix hasn't turned it over. But when we take a look at I apologize. Denver's been playing great football at home. Been playing great football, period, right now. They've won 3 straight games. I think this is an opportunity for them to put their foot down and say, you know what? We're the second best team in this division. Winning 3 straight games isn't a fluke. We beat some solid teams. We beat the Jets. We beat the Raiders. This is an opportunity for them to show that what they have is not a fluke. And it's the same for the Chargers. 2-2 start, beating the Raiders and the Panthers. Not the best look. Losing to the Steelers, losing to the Chiefs, kind of expected, but they played all these teams close. It's going to be decided who gets on the scoreboard first is going to win this game, and I think I'm leaning towards Denver in a close one, 22-20. Then we get the Pittsburgh Steelers favored by 3 points heading to Las Vegas. The Raiders and the Steelers both come in limping off of a couple of bad losses, really. The Steelers looked incompetent offensively against the Cowboys, and the Raiders couldn't get anything going against the Broncos. Both, in theory, solid defenses, but still, the way that the offenses had been going for these teams, you expect a lot more out of it. This is going to be an ugly game. This is going to be an ugly game with a capital U. It's not going to be a fun watch, and I've never done this before, but something in me tells me this is going to be a tie. I don't know why. Neither of these teams seem to have competent offenses. The Steelers don't know how to get over 20 points in a week. I think the final score is 20-20 in this one, but that's a little crazy. So just walk with me on that one. Then we get Detroit favored by 3 points, traveling to Dallas. The Cowboys coming off of a huge last-second win. We just talked about it against the Steelers. The Detroit Lions off of a bye. They're looking to prove that they are one of the top teams in football, traveling down to Dallas, a place where they got their hearts broken last year on some bad penalties down the stretch when going for 2, maybe some weird coaching decisions, but that's just Dan Campbell for you. These two teams are in very different spots. Dallas has a huge weakness, and that's running the ball down their throats, and that is what the Detroit Lions specialize in. And I don't think this game is going to be very close. Detroit's favored by 3. I think they blow them out 37-17. Heading over to the second to last division matchup of the weekend, as the Atlanta Falcons, favored by 6 points, travel to Carolina. The Panthers are a mess. Atlanta is coming off of its biggest victory in a very long time. It got all of its weapons involved. We've seen that machine fully start to click, and it's still got room to grow. You can still get a little more use out of Bijan Robinson, get those running backs involved a little bit. But Kirk Cousins coming off of a 500-yard game, I don't think he'll quite do that again. But against the Carolina Panthers defense, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he put up another 400-yard game. That's just how this Carolina defense has been all season long, and I think Atlanta wins pretty comfortably, 31-16. Now we get into the Sunday night cap game as the Cincinnati Bengals, favored by 4, head to New York to take on the New York Giants. We talked about teams without defenses, that is just the Cincinnati Bengals. They have no defense. They have one of the most explosive offenses in the entire league. And the Giants secondary is not good enough to keep up with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. They could barely hold down CeeDee Lamb, giving up a long touchdown to him. This is a Giants team that their front seven, I think, is playing really good football right now. They've gotten over 7 sacks in 2 games this season. This is a really, really good Giants. This is really good Giants front four. Linebackers are fine, but the secondary is where they're going to get lit up, and that's going to be the issue because the Cincinnati Bengals defense is not going to be able to stop much. Can Daniel Jones do what he did last week? Can he just dink and dunk his way down the field? If he's able to do that, the Giants have a chance in this game. Otherwise, it's going to be a blowout. I think I'm leaning more towards the Giants putting up a competent offensive game plan rather than not, because I can't imagine them being completely shut down against a defense as bad as the Cincinnati Bengals have been all season long. I think Cincinnati wins this game either way, but I do think we're leaning towards the closer, high-scoring version of this game. The Bengals win 36-31. Then our Monday night game, the Buffalo Bills travel to New York, 2 straight primetime games in New York, just like week 1 of last season, to take on Aaron Rodgers with a new head coach and the New York Jets. Buffalo favored by 2.5 in this one, and I think the Jets get that interim head coach boost. It's one of those things that just seems to happen every single time. First game, interim head coach wins. I think this is a really good Jets team. I really do. We'll do a more detailed breakdown of this game on Monday, but score prediction for now, 23-20. The Jets take this game in a must-win game for them. But let me know what you thought. Do you have any games that you think I'm way off on? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we are taking a look at the college football slate. I've picked 15 of the biggest games, in my opinion, and we're going to go over all of them, talk about some upsets, talk about some of the biggest games in the biggest slate of the college football schedule so far. Cannot wait for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, October 11th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over our NFL Week 6 game picks. In this segment, we're taking a look at college football, the Week 7 game picks, and what is the best slate of college games so far. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use the Super Chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, October 11th. But like I was saying, finishing off our show today here, talking all about college football week 7. We have some of the biggest matchups so far on the college slate. The biggest matchup of the season this week between number 2 and number 3, Ohio State and Oregon. We'll get to that one later on. We're going to start off with a matchup on Friday. Today, the biggest matchup of the day as number 16 Utah travels to Arizona State. And I know on paper it sounds like one of those games that Utah should dominate, because they should. But without Cam Rising, that team is awful. The Arizona State offense, I think, has a chance to put up some points on this Utah defense. I know that is a big ask. I know that is a big ask for them. But Utah, I think, coming in without Cam Rising, I just can't see them continuing to win football games. And I think Arizona State is the one that's going to shock them this year. I think Arizona State pulls off the huge upset here, wins 23-20. Up next, we are transitioning over to Saturday, the weekend games. A not ranked matchup in the Big Ten, but between two solid teams in Wisconsin and Rutgers. Rutgers coming off of a brutal loss against Nebraska last week. Nebraska, a good football team. Rutgers doesn't quite have that juice offensively, but I think defensively they have enough to shut down a team like Wisconsin. Wisconsin has been close. They're coming off of a big victory, an upset victory over USC last week. A top 11 win. That is huge for them, but I don't think Wisconsin really is that great of a team. I just think USC has some obvious weaknesses that Michigan exploited, which is just run the ball better than they do. And that's how you win the game. I think Rutgers can take down this Wisconsin team. They're favored by 2. I think they win 21-26. Then we get Washington, another team coming off of a huge upset. I guess it's technically not an upset. They were favored in that game, but they come off beating a top 10 opponent in Michigan. Michigan falls very far in this week's poll, but they're traveling to Iowa here. Another Big Ten battle for them. Washington, again, coming off of that big game, I think they're due for a letdown. I think Washington's a solid team, but Iowa's defense, we saw them shut down Ohio State for 2.5 quarters last week. That is huge. That is not an easy task, and I think since they were able to do that against Ohio State, they'll be able to do that pretty much same thing against Washington. Their offense is slightly better. It's not a world beater by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think Iowa is good enough, favored by 3, to win this game at home. I think they take it 24-18. Then we get Georgia Tech. They started off their season hot, taking on North Carolina. Georgia Tech favored by 4 in this one. I think Georgia Tech dominates. We've seen back-to-back weeks North Carolina just get disposed of on the football field. James Madison, then Duke, then last week. They just get killed once again. I just think North Carolina doesn't have the juice, the defense to get it done. North Carolina loses this game pretty handily. Georgia Tech takes it 38-24. Then the Red River rivalry is back. The number 1 team in the nation, the Texas Longhorns, favored by 14.5 points in this one, take on number 18 Oklahoma. And I think Oklahoma is taking a little bit of disrespect on this one. I think Texas is a much better team than Oklahoma is, but by more than 2 touchdowns, I think that's a little bit too much. Oklahoma's defense is one of the better defenses in the country. They've played some tough opponents. Their offense has been able to step up when they need to, and the Red River rivalry always gets these teams doing something crazy. Maybe we get a crazy upset happen in this one. I don't quite see that happening, but I definitely think this game stays very close until the end. Texas wins 31-21. Then Penn State, the number 4 team in the nation. Crazy Penn State at number 4 there. Favored by 3.5, traveling across the country to take on USC. That is, again, a tough ask. We saw Miami struggle with a cross-country trip, but USC has some weaknesses. It's weaknesses that have been exploited by teams like Wisconsin, by teams like Michigan. We talked about it earlier on in this segment. This is a team that can be beaten, and I think Penn State is on a roll. Coming off of a bye here, this is a team that I just think is better than USC. USC has got to go through some growing pains after losing a Heisman caliber quarterback. They're going through a whole shift of philosophy now. I don't think USC is going to be able to handle Penn State. Penn State wins 33-24. Then we have Cal traveling to undefeated number 22 Pitt. Pitt favored by 3 points at home in this one. Cal coming off of a near win against a top 5 team in the nation in Miami. Miami obviously comes back from 25 points down. That was a crazy comeback from them, and Cal can't have that letdown again. But I think Cal has shown that they are a team that can't be messed with. This is a really good Cal team, and honestly, I think Pitt is a little bit of a fraudulent one. They've come back from a couple of big deficits. They haven't played their best football in every single game, and I think there's at least 3 teams that are better than them that aren't ranked. I don't think Pitt should be ranked right now. I think Cal takes care of this one. Close game. Cal wins 34-30. Then we have Louisville, who's lost 2 straight games, are reeling. This is a must-win game for them, favored by 7.5 points, taking on the Virginia Cavaliers in Charlottesville, Virginia. Virginia's been a surprisingly solid team. I've bet against them a lot this year, at least when we do these game picks, and they've won a lot of these games. Virginia, again, a solid team. They deserve some credit for what they've done, but Louisville's offense is something different than what they've run across so far. Louisville taking tough losses in back-to-back weeks. I think they get this one in a must-win, win 40-30. And this is an interesting one coming up. Arizona taking on number 14 BYU. BYU, who's looked really solid. They beat a team in Kansas State who absolutely demolished Arizona earlier on in the season. BYU, I think, is a good team. I think Arizona's a good team as well. With that offense, any given night they can go out and they can put up 60 points with the offense that they have. The defense I'm a little more concerned about, and I think regardless of how good that offense is, regardless of how good T-Mac is, I think Arizona's not going to have enough to hold off BYU. BYU wins 35-31. Vanderbilt taking on Kentucky off of their huge win versus Alabama. And I don't want to say it's a letdown game. Kentucky's favored by 12.5 points. Diego Pavia is going to keep this within 1 possession. That I can absolutely guarantee. I think this is 100% a 1-possession game. So I think 12.5 is way too much. But I think Vanderbilt coming off of that win, their first win against an AP top 5 opponent in school history, I think for sure this is a little bit of a letdown game for them. I think we take Vanderbilt to lose, but in close one, 27-25. Iowa State, the number 11 team in the nation, favored by 3 points, taking on a West Virginia team that has gotten a couple tough breaks. They lose a tight one to Pitt earlier on in the season, now ranked. They lose one to Penn State, now a number 4 team in the nation. Their losses have, grown to look pretty solid so far. West Virginia, a good football team. This is not going to be an easy game for Iowa State, but I trust that defense enough that I think they're going to be able to squeak by. I think 3 points is close. I'm taking Iowa State to win 23-21. Syracuse favored by 3 points, traveling to NC State. I'm going to keep this one brief. NC State's been awful. NC State has been just really bad at football this year. I don't believe in this program. Syracuse, on the other hand, has looked really good almost every single week. Their one loss was on a walk-off field goal to a solid Stanford team. I think Syracuse takes this one pretty easy, 45-20. Then number 18, Kansas State, traveling to Colorado. Deion Sanders, Coach Prime has got his guys going. They're 4-1. They've got a path to the playoffs, especially if they can pull off this upset and win this game. Kansas State is a team that I think has been up and down, a little bit inconsistent. When they go up against a team like a Tulane, they've looked bad. They looked bad earlier on in the season in their big loss to BYU. I think Colorado takes this game in a close one, 34-30. That offense is going to be too much for that K-State defense to handle. But now on to the two biggest games of the week, the ranked versus ranked, starting off in Ole Miss. Ole Miss favored by 3.5 points, the number 9 team in the nation, traveling to Death Valley to take on the number 13 LSU Tigers. And I think the location of this one makes all the difference. Ole Miss, a really good team, but going down to play in Death Valley at night, that's just a tough look. Ole Miss coming off of a big win, one they needed really badly. I think LSU is a good team. I really do think they're a good team, and I think these two teams are a lot closer than a lot of people think. Ole Miss favored by 3.5. I think since it's at home for LSU, they get this win. Huge win for their program, shoots them back up into playoff contention. They win 36-29. And then the game of the week, the game of the season, the last one on our list here today. Number 2, Ohio State, favored by 3 points, traveling to Oregon, and that's a really important thing. Number 3, Oregon are hosting in this one, and Oregon has looked a lot better since week 2. They've started to get their stuff together. They're starting to click at the right time, and they are ready for this matchup. They've worked all the way back up to number 3 from back down at number 9 earlier on in the season, crawling up because they win games. Dillon Gabriel has looked awesome. Their biggest test of the season so far against Boise State is starting to age pretty solid. Boise State looks like a really good team, potentially could get a top 4 seed in the playoffs if enough of these power conference teams lose. That's one of those things that's not out of the question. I think that's really cool about this new 12-team playoff format there. But besides that, Oregon, again, really efficient. Dillon Gabriel's played awesome. We've seen Ohio State not really play too many great teams. They're coming off of a big win against an Iowa program that I think is solid. Their defense shut them down. Their defense looked good. A week before, they said they hadn't played anybody. They played Michigan State, a team in Michigan State that I think is starting to get a little bit more respect around the country. It's not the most amount of respect. It's still not a great team, but it's a good win. They're ramping up, and they're ready for it. Will Howard has played good football. This is going to be a game of who makes the least amount of mistakes. As much as I want to say it's the Ducks, as much as I want to say the Ducks can pull it off, I think this Ohio State team is the most complete team in the nation. Their defense, their running game, their passing game, they have maybe the best receiver in the nation as well. This Ohio State team is just stacked from top to bottom, and they're built for a national championship. I think Oregon is probably second in there. So this is going to be probably the best game in college football this season. I think this is going to come down to the wire. I think Ohio State takes this one on the road 45-37 in a shootout. This should be a lot of fun, and I cannot wait for college football this weekend. This is a huge weekend in sports. Obviously, college football, biggest weekend of the year. NFL, we have some games starting at 9:30, ending at 11 on the East Coast of America here. And then, of course, baseball playoffs continue all weekend. We'll be back on Monday covering all of it. We'll make sure to hit up on the ALCS and the NLCS when we know what those matchups are. We'll break down all the action from this weekend and anything else crazy that happens as well. So make sure you tune back in on Monday. Can't wait to see you guys then. You all have a great weekend, and I will see you same time, same place on Monday. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up, my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that